6, and this time we're going to investigate example 2. Remember in example 1, the book gave you those quadratic functions already factored. Example 2, you guessed it, we have to do the factoring and then we can solve for the zeros. So because I don't want you putting this into your calculator as in a graphing mode, we want to practice each strategy. So I'm going to ask you to really exercise some discipline here and do it the way I'm asking you to do it, okay? Every strategy has usefulness. And sometimes we lock in on one strategy and there are others that are equally as good and maybe even faster and much more accurate, okay? So let's start with example A. This is what I would call a very, very easy trinomial. I remember I used that wording with you in class. An easy trinomial is a trinomial that has a 1 out in front, a coefficient of 1, okay? So what that means is when I factor it, I can just focus on the back end numbers. What are factors of 10 that add up to be 7? What are factors of 10 that add up to be 7? Now hopefully you are saying to me positive 5 and positive 2. We know that 5 times 2 is positive 10, and we know 5 plus 2 is positive 7. Those are the two numbers that we need to target. Those are our quantities, okay? And then we now need to calculate our zeros. So let's start with the first quantity. What would make x plus 5 equal 0? Well, you could set up a one-step equation. Just take x plus 5, set it equal to 0, and then subtract 5 from each side, and you'll get x equals negative 5. You do the same thing with x plus 2. Set it equal to 0, take away 2, and x equals negative 2. And there are your two zeros. This quadratic equation will cross at negative 5 and negative 2 on your x-axis. Okay? Let's take a look at letter B. Not ready to factor just yet. We really need to get everything on one side and 0 on the other side. So let's move that 8. Let's bring it back over here. And now what we've got is x squared plus 2x minus 8 is equal now to 0, because those cancel. So we're ready to factor it. It's what I would consider an easy, very easy coefficient of 1, easy trinomial. So we can just create our two quantities there. Okay, so we're looking for factors of negative 8 that add up to be positive 2. Factors of negative 8 that add up to be positive 2. Now hopefully you're seeing in your head positive 4 and negative 2. We know that 4 times negative 2 is negative 8. We also know that 4 plus negative 2 is positive 2. That's exactly what we need. Okay? And now we just have to figure out what in the world our zeros are. We have it factored, now we can tell. So let's, we have x plus 4 equals 0. If you need that one-step equation, take away 4, and you'll have x equals negative 4, and do the same thing with x minus 2. Add 2 to each side, and you'll have x equals positive 2. So if you can eyeball it without doing the one-step equation, then do it without the one-step equation. It's perfectly fine with me. You do need to factor it, though. You do need to see that part. Okay? C is just like A. It's an easy trinomial. What are factors of 1 that add up to be 2? Well, that's no real mystery. 1 times 1 is 1. 1 plus 1 is 2. Now notice the quantities are exactly the same. Now that tells me that this trinomial is a perfect square trinomial. That's what that tells me when I have the same binomial factors. So all I have to do is set one of them equal to 0, take away 1, and I have x equals 1. Now you can go ahead and solve the other one, but you know what? You're going to get the same exact answer And so it can only cross the x-axis at -1 one time. So this is really not necessary when the quantities are identical. What this tells me is I have 1, 0, and my 0 and my vertex are the same point. My vertex is the 0 because that perfect square trinomial, it has that situation always. Okay, so let's see here. Let me do letter D with you. We have a little bit of a problem. We need to get everything on the same side. So I'm going to add 2x squared to each side. Okay. So now that's going to give me 0 equals 2x squared minus 12x plus 18. Now to make this a little bit easier to factor, that's all right. We'll just do it like it is. That's fine. We're going to factor by grouping. So we're going to have to rename that middle term, okay? And so remember, 2 times 18 is 36. So I need factors of 36 that add up to be -12, okay? So hopefully you're seeing in your head -6 times -6. -6 times -6 is positive 36. But it also adds up to be -12. So I'm going to put -6x, and then plus 18, just like that. And then I'll just continue down. So I'm going to pull out a 2x, and that's going to leave me with x minus 3. And I'm going to pull out a -6, and that's going to leave me with x minus 3 as well. So I'm going to end up with x minus 3 is one of my quantities, and 2x minus 6 is my other. And then, you know, just go ahead and solve it. X minus 3 equals 0. You're going to have to add 3 to each side. So one of your zeros is x. And do the same thing with 2x minus 6. We'll add 6. So I'll have 2x equals 6 and then divide by 2. Now, what does that tell you whenever you get the same exact x? Hey, the situation we had in C was that was a perfect square trinomial. And even though D didn't look like a perfect square trinomial, if I had factored out that GCF of 2 initially, you would have seen that it was a perfect square trinomial. So it only has 1, 0. This really we don't need, has 1, 0, and it's going to be also our vertex. Okay? So hopefully I've given you enough information here to make you really super dangerous. And I'm going to give you extra credit, so 1 point for each one. You have to show me the factoring method. I don't want to see any answers that came off the calculator, okay? So factor method, I got to see the work for it. So you should have plenty of room on your paper. You have more space than I do in order to solve these, okay? So good luck, bring your questions to class.